So hello everybody. I'm Jeff Hausman with Arupe Virtual, and I am pleased to have you join us for this webinar in Productive Struggle. So today I've got most of you know Gabrielle Martin and David Martino, the two people who are really important to ABLI, and then we're really pleased to have Jack Rice with us, and I'll allow David to introduce Jack in a second. But what we always like to do when we start is to have a quick prayer and then a little bit of a context setting. And so that's my job before I turn it over. So with that, let us get ready for a quick prayer. And this one is on deep listening. So God of silence and God of all sound, help me to listen. Help me to do the deep listening to the sounds of my soul, waiting to hear your soft voice calling me deeper into you. Give me attentive ears that begin to separate the noise from the sounds that are you. You who have been speaking to me and through me my whole life for so long that you can seem like background noise. Today, help me hear you anew. All right, amen. So, real quick, just to again, this is our second in our a second of two webinars on the productive struggle. And for those who weren't here the first time, ABLI, as we kind of working on your behalf of your schools, really what we're trying to do, we've identified in this age of AI and all of the uncertainties that it brings forth, is to try and think about the things that we feel matter the most. And as we've struggled with it over the last year plus, 2 years plus, really where we've sort of landed is the need is what we think is the need to really focus on productive struggle, on helping students really recognize that learning exists in the struggle itself, right? And so with that, I just want to give a little bit of a framing relating to that, and that really when we think about it, and I think we would all agree that ultimately, why are we doing what we do, right, as educators, and particularly Catholic educators? It's really about human thriving. And if you think about human thriving from the perspective of Catholic social teaching, right, which is a perspective that I really like, it's part of it is recognizing our own humanity, recognizing the dignity that we have and the dignity of others, right? Recognizing that we are social creatures, right, in solidarity with other people, right? And as you kind of walk through that and recognizing that level of solidarity, what comes from that in Catholic social teaching is that there are certain rights, right, that go along with that, but more importantly, there are responsibilities. And to me, if you point at that concept of responsibility, and you want to connect those dots, to me that's sort of where learning hits, right? And that we have a responsibility to be productive members of society, and by doing so, right, that means we have to be in a position to learn and to grow, right? And so for me, that's sort of how this all fits together. And I think it's important to recognize that within that framework, then it's that 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 level of responsibility, it points to the need for domain knowledge, right? And that domain knowledge remains irreplaceable, right? So you can't just offload domain knowledge to AI and say, well, I'll just go and do this, right? There is a level at which we have to understand our world around us in order for us to fully participate. Okay. So with that, the big question is how do we do that, right? And for that, we've just asked Jack Rice, and he's going to tell us in an hour. No, in all seriousness, Jack is here because Gabby and David have had a chance to listen and observe Jack in some other contexts, and they thought this is the guy who can help just explain a few things, clarify a few points for us. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to David Martino so he can more properly introduce Jack and get us underway. So thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Just before I introduce Jack formally, just a quick note on the overview of the way this will proceed. So, as Jack is speaking, if you have questions, please use the Q&A, populate that, or you can also throw them into the chat. He may pose a couple of questions, looking for some feedback in the chat. So, feel free to engage using that medium, and we'll collect everything and then present the questions to him at the end, unless there's an opportunity throughout. So that's the first part. And just very quickly, I won't review his formal bio. It was in the write-up, and you all had a chance to see that. He's worked with a number of universities over the years, from Loyola University, Maryland, to a number of Canadian universities with whom he continues to work, and now also with Harrisburg University. So he's been engaged in learning, teaching and learning for a very long time. I think very quickly, anecdotally, when we first saw Jack at a conference, he was up on stage and he gave a wonderful sort of segue into just how he came to the idea and journey of education. And he talked a lot about sort of the Jesuits. So immediately my ears perked up and said, "Oh, I was curious about his take here." But more interestingly was when he got to Maria Montessori, and he gave this quick little example about, people kept asking her about what she was doing, and she said, "All I've been doing for all these years is pointing at the child. And these people keep asking me questions because they're looking at my finger." And I loved that and what that said about his perspective, and the emphasis he placed on where the real value of education belongs. And I think that really touches on where he'll take us today. So without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Jack Rice. Thank you, Jack, for being with us.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Fantastic. Hi, Gabby. Great to see you again. I've asked them to. I can't see anyone except Gabby and David, and I've asked David to look at the chat for me. And thanks so much, Jeff, for that centering to get us started. Really enjoyed that. Yeah. And so when Gabby and David came to me and wanted me to talk about the productive struggle, I had a story in mind. I had an idea in mind, and I sort of developed that into this talk. And I'm really interested in your feedback today, actually, to see if I'm on the right track or not here. This is something I've thought passionately about for so many different years, and I'm really interested in how it connects with you and the work that you're doing. So I have been very proud to say that I have been in education since I was 4 years of age. Since my first time I wandered down to school from kindergarten at the age of 4, I've done nothing else. And so I have thought passionately about how you pass on ideas to young minds. It's what I've really spent my life's work doing. I think I'm most proud in my career that I have started infant programs. I've run preschools. I've been the headmaster of an elementary school. I've taught middle school, high school, community college, undergraduate students, and graduate students as well. And I've been the graduate advisor to a 75-year-old graduate student. So unless there's an age in there in between, it's pretty tough to get one past the keeper. And I've loved every single minute that I've spent in education. And I'm just fascinated by the process, as I say, of passing on ideas to young minds. I am also deeply grateful to get the opportunity to speak to educators. It's just my favorite thing that I do in the world. And so I remember my first day at Teachers College at McGill University. I came into the big auditorium. The Dean of Education spoke. He got to the podium there. We were all sitting in the audience, and he said, "Today you embark on your career in education, and over the next 40 years, you will call amongst your colleagues some of the finest people in the world." And that absolutely stuck with me. It continues to be true, and to meet sort of all of you along the way. But I have to say, at one time, I wasn't thinking that I was going to have a career in education. I actually thought that I was going to be the next great right-handed pitcher and cleanup hitter at the same time for the Toronto Blue Jays. And so that's what I spent a lot of my time focused on in my youth. Now, this gentleman, this player in the screen, if you are near your chat box at all, your box at all, I would like you to write into the chat box who you think this player is, this picture of this player. because this player came a little bit before my time, but I was really ensconced in this gentleman's career. I really wanted to know more about him, mostly because there's two quotes. Hold on, I can see the chat right now. We've got, yes, Williams got it. Mickey Mantle, very nice, thank you. Mickey Mantle, big fan of Mickey Mantle because of two quotes that I heard him say. The first one that I heard Mickey Mantle say was when he was being interviewed by a reporter, and the reporter said, "Mickey, do you ever go to home plate actually trying to hit a home run?" And Mickey said, "Every single time. Every time someone throws a ball in my direction, I try to hit it as far as I possibly can." And so, baseball was that simple to Mickey Mantle. See the ball, hit it as far as you possibly can. But later on in his career, he actually became a broadcaster. And as a broadcaster, he got to sit and watch the game. And then this was another quote that he said, which I thought was fascinating. It's unbelievable how much you don't know about a game that you've been playing your entire life. And it really strikes me true. And I really thought of it in terms of my career as an educator. Because if I'm teaching, if I'm working with teachers, if I'm a headmaster, I'm deep into the game. I am so far into the game. It is very difficult for me to back up for a second and actually see what is going on in front of me. And so I've had moments in time in my career where that has been revealed to me. And it's been, incredibly powerful. So this is about metacognition. This is about us thinking about why we're doing certain things as educators. I had another incredible metacognitive moment in my career when I met this person. And so this is question number 2 for you in the chat box. And David may have given it away, or I'm not sure, he may have given you a hint. But this is one of my heroes as an educator. So if you've got it in the chat box, you could just type in who you think this person is. I would love to see some comical answers too, perhaps, to who this person might be. But I was very taken the first time I started working with preschool children and young elementary students, because something changed in me as an educator at that moment in time. And I realized that for a great deal of time in my career, I thought education was something that I did. So it originated with me. It was something that happened at my level that I was imparting, whether that was a lesson or an experience or a behavior or etc. It started with me and it came from me. But what I came to understand in working in early childhood education was that education is something that is happening inside the person in front of me. They're on a journey in front of me, and they're piecing things together. And it's a natural process. It develops spontaneously in the human being. And our charge as educators is to get the environment right for them. Try to get that environment right so that we can help them to grow and develop the best way they possibly can. That's really our charge. And I'll just check and see if anybody's got it in the chat here. And yes, that is Dr. Maria Montessori, as David mentioned earlier, and certainly a hero of mine for reframing the project of education. And once I understood that, I've really applied it not only to every educational circumstance I've been in, but really in every circumstance that I get involved in writ large across the world. It's what are the conditions, what are the best conditions for growth and development. And then I think I've got one more question for you. This one may have more than one answer, I'm not sure. So oftentimes when I start to talk about education and learning, where I come to is I want to talk about human beings, because that's who we teach on a day-to-day basis. It's human beings that we're working with. And I was thinking one day that if we held the Olympics, and instead of it just being human beings in one country against human beings in another country, what would happen as a thought experiment if we decided to invite all of the members of the animal kingdom to join us on the journey? So on the Olympic Games, we got to the 100-meter dash and we all stood at the line there. ready to take off. And beside us was an ostrich and a cheetah and a jaguar, etc. I don't think we've got much of a chance at the 100-meter dash. But there are, a few events that we do not bad in. But I believe that there's one event that human beings would not only eke out a victory, I think they would come in the top 50 places in the event. And I think they, year after year after year, I think we would just shut them right out. And so I'd be interested in the chat box if anybody has any ideas of what event they believe that humans would still dominate if we invite all the members of the animal kingdom into the games. So let's see if we've got any answers in here to this question. Marathon. Marathon's an interesting one. Very good. Yeah. Liam, thank you very much. Anything else? Any others down here? Curling? Yeah, curling, not bad. Although I have to say, there's probably some other animals that are better on the ice than we are. Yes, curling, figure skating could be tough too. There are some animals that probably don't even need the blades. Pretty good.
We have one
archery
Q&A as well that says archery. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, archery. Yeah, for sure. Got to have some dexterity there. There are some animals that are pretty dexterous. Definitely think so. But I'm actually going to go back, if you don't mind. I actually believe the first answer is correct. I truly believe that it is the marathon. That human beings have an absolutely uncanny ability to endure and persist. And I think if you brought all the members of the animal kingdom together on the starting line of the marathon, they would run about the first 100, 200 meters and say, why are we doing this? What's at the end? Are you kidding me? There's like a piece of silver at the end of this? No way. Absolutely no way. But human beings have endorphins, and they have easy access to these endorphins. And when our endorphins hit us, we just keep going and we go and we go. And the next thing you know, it's 26.2 miles. So this is an incredible aspect of human beings that we should never forget, especially if the students that are in front of us, they have access to endorphins in their body that they minimize their pain, and they allow us to continue to persist and persist. Very important part of being human. The second thing that human beings have is access to another hormone in their body called dopamine. And so dopamine is that hormone in your body that human beings get when they accomplish tasks. So one time, a few thousand years ago, two people looked at each other and said, what's 2 + 2? And somebody said 4. And then the next thing you knew, we were putting a man on the moon. Because that ability to tap into dopamine to continue to move forward and complete tasks is just an incredible human system. Again, when we think about the students in our charge, when we think about the productive struggle, how do we tap into their endorphins? How do we tap into their dopamine? Important components. But it doesn't end there. Those are both very, very selfish hormones. They help us, they get us up for things, and then they make us keep going and keep going for individual pursuits. But I would argue that it's not our endorphins or our dopamine that actually define us and the success of our species. It's something else. And it's our ability to work in community and problem solve in community. Work together. And that's attributed to another hormone in our body, many hormones, one in particular, called serotonin. And here's my best example of serotonin in action. It's an amazing hormone because I was in New York City about a week ago, and a young woman brushed past me. And as she was walking past me on the street, she dropped her scarf. And I noticed she dropped her scarf. And I saw it and I took a look up and I went over and I gathered the scarf and I started running and I was, hey, miss. And I think she was worried about turning back. This was New York City and she had some huge person running after her. But she did turn around and she noticed that I was standing there and she was noticing that I had that scarf. And I presented to her and said, I'm Marissa, I think that you dropped this. And she turned around and looked at me, and the trust that she felt and the pride that she felt in that exchange, you could just see it wash over her entire body. That's serotonin. That is serotonin coursing through her veins. And here's the nice thing about serotonin. When she gets that experience and I hand her the scarf, I feel the same pride. I feel the same trust. And serotonin hits me in the same way, exactly the same. So our ability to work in community and problem solve in community is really testament to some of these hormones in our body. And I want to talk about one more, and that's cortisol. So we're used to hearing about cortisol. We're used to hearing it associated with stress in our bodies, and it is a very delicate balance. So we experience cortisol when things aren't going quite right, or we're surprised or alarmed, get a bit of a fight or flight response. And if that cortisol stays in our body for a long period of time, it's a very long-lasting and destructive force. But also, used sparingly and used intentionally, it can be a very useful piece of a learner's overall profile. So my question is, when I went to Teachers College for the first time, why did they tell me about this? These are 4 hormones in the human body that if I'm teaching people and I want them to productively struggle over a period of time, I would say the first thing that I'd need to know is what are endorphins, what is dopamine, what's serotonin, what's cortisol, and how do they work together in a human being? And as I said, there is upside to all of these hormones. So endorphins, they're energizing. They alleviate pain, they lower stress, they improve my mood, they provide a sense of well-being for us. And so when Jeff did the prayer at that beginning, did you kind of feel it a little? I did, because I don't, people don't pray in front of me all that much. So when it happens, I'm like, oh, that's lovely. That was absolutely lovely. Just settled me. I felt my shoulders going down a little bit. It just hit me really, really nice. There are some things that we can do that increase endorphins in our body. They are exercise, as we mentioned, the endorphins kick in, going outside, music. So oftentimes when I'm teaching online, I've got my music box right here, and it's probably violating copyright, but I've got it going in the background a little bit. I also have my harmonica in front of me, and that probably induces more cortisol than endorphins, believe it or not. But nevertheless, music helps. And you know what else helps? Laughter. Funny matters. So when you teach, a little bit of humor goes a long way. There was a reason why on that first slide, there's a picture of me in my little blue shirt, and I'm at a podium and I'm smiling. It's like I'm laughing. It's so important. And I have in online classes, I say, make sure there's a picture of yourself and make sure you're smiling. That is going to build so much trust so early with your learners. It's going to put them in that great state, that endorphin producing state. Dopamine, important chemical, activates pleasure, get a feeling of satisfaction, enhances motivation, improves your concentration. Now, great things that increase dopamine in a human being: completing tasks, finishing tasks, also eating, also cocaine. So there's things that aren't healthy as well, which we'll talk about in a moment, that increase dopamine in our body. But if you want to really get people to motivate to continue and progress quickly, dopamine's the one that'll do it. We talked about syncing and serotonin, social cohesion, improves memory. I never forget a face. I'll never forget the face of that person I returned the scarf to. Harmony, feelings of pride, feelings of trust, and then cortisol increases energy. Boom! I gotta go right now. I gotta run. Let's do it. Raises alertness really fast. Reduces nervousness. There's no time to be nervous. I've been worried about this for 2 weeks, but now it actually has to be done in the next 10 seconds. Let's go. And creates that sense of activation. So those are all the upside of our hormones. But our hormones also have downsides as well. So the how do I say this? The lesson to be learned from the marathon is that no one should do a marathon. The first time somebody did a marathon, they were in Athens, they ran to marathon, they were a messenger, they had a piece of paper, and they dropped dead. I mean, you shouldn't be running 26.2 miles. And we've all seen this when people that you know are runners. My daughter's a runner, and she will have her knees will be shot, her ankles will be sore, her back is killing her, and she's just going out to run a 10K. And Mackenzie, why don't you just take the day off? Can't. I'm addicted. I'm addicted to the high. I'm addicted to the endorphins in my body. So too many endorphins, not a great thing. Too little endorphins, not a great thing either. We talk about dopamine. Dopamine, great force to motivate us to continue. Too much dopamine leads to aggression, delusion, lack of impulse control. So some very negative consequences. And we know them, we see them when students are just hooked on that dopamine binge, that surface level learning that they just want to keep doing and doing. Too little, problems with coordination, low energy, low activation. Syncing, too much serotonin, agitation, restlessness, confusion. There's just too many people talking all at once. What am I in this group work for again? And then too little, no social cohesion, no harmony, depression, anxiety, mood swings. And of course, with cortisol as well, too much, we know that can lead to stress in a very unhealthy state. So we have to be very careful of cortisol when we introduce it as educators. But too little, boredom, fatigue, etc. So my approach in education to creating the conditions, and as I say, I think it's our job as educators to create the conditions for the productive struggle, is to keep learners in a zone. So when I go into a classroom and I evaluate teachers, I will put down on a piece of paper A, B, C, and S. And I want to see those 4 activities in a little bit of a balance. So are there activities in the classroom that release endorphins? Are there activities that allow people to continue tasks and complete and finish and motivate themselves? Are there activities where people can work together? And are there activities that produce challenge, but not too much too soon? So my concept in teaching, when I think about helping educators keep their students in a productive struggle, is to keep them in a learning zone. And so I'll give you an example of just a lesson. So when I'm thinking of creating a lesson, this could be a lesson that I'm creating online. It could be a lesson that I'm creating in person, in any kind of form. I think endorphins first. As I said, a lot of times music will be playing. There'll be a funny story. There'll be something about, me growing up and wanting to be a baseball player or whatever it happens to be. I've started lessons online where I've asked students, listen, before we start, we're going to talk about photosynthesis today. I just need you to run outside and grab a picture of an object that you think is going through photosynthesis. Could be the grass, could be trees, whatever. Could you just run outside and do that for me? I've hit on 3 things. One, it's a ridiculous thing, so they laugh. Secondly, they got to run outside and do it. The third thing is they're going outside. I know I'm going to get them into that sort of nice, relaxed state. I've played a little bit of music. From now on, thanks to Jeff, I'm going to do a little prayer. Great way to start the lesson and create that sense of endorphins. Next thing I'm going to do is hit them with a little bit of dopamine. So the fundamental unit of teaching is the question. That's it. It's all it is the question. And so oftentimes I'll go into classrooms now in higher education and I'll take a stopwatch and I will click the stopwatch when the lesson begins. And I'll look at the watch and say, when is the first question going to be asked? Sometimes I'll go, okay, that's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20, half an hour. The last time I did this exercise, I clicked it off at 37 minutes. And the first question was, do you have any questions? Right? So your job as an educator, to me, the fundamental unit that you're looking at is, what's the question? Now, when I started my lesson today, I asked you 3 questions. Who's the baseball player? Who's the educator? And what sport would we win or lose in the Olympics, right? So I'm trying to engage you early with a question. To me, a great activity is a what question, not a why question. Why questions can be a bit challenging early on. How questions, again, a little bit of depth. But if I ask a what question, what is the most underrated part of Terry Fox's run across Canada? It's a what question, right? Sometimes, I will be honest, I paper the house. I will talk to a student beforehand or the lesson before and say, hey, next time we're going to be talking about Terry Fox. Do you remember the time that he stopped in Toronto? Yeah, I remember that time. Okay, do you know what? Okay, so you'll know that if I asked? Yeah, I'll know that. Okay, good. Okay. So the next question, I might lead with that question because I want the students really quickly to tap into that dopamine. I've asked them a what question. They can answer that what question. They got that one right. They're going to get the next one right. They're ready to respond, right? Endorphins, dopamine. The third thing I've done is now, let's tap into some serotonin. So this could be, online in chat, could be in person. Hey, talk to the person next to each other. Tell me the one thing that you would take out of Wuthering Heights to make it way better. So that's a what question. Oh, it's like if they're reading Wuthering Heights, it's like, okay, great. Yeah, let's get rid of that Heathcliff guy. Whatever it happens to be, right? So a little buzz group, little chat beside each other, get their impression back. And now all of a sudden I've hit endorphins, I've hit dopamine, I've hit serotonin. I'm ready to go with this lesson. This is happening, right? But I'm not going to give them a challenge just yet. I haven't earned that just yet. So now I'm going to come back with a little bit more dopamine, just a quick knowledge check. Are we on the right track? Yes. All right. I answered some questions early. I continue to answer some questions. Great. Perfect. Now just a little bit of movement. Rearrange yourself, a little drink, a little break, whatever, a little bit more music, ready to go, little endorphins. When I used to teach in classrooms, I used to put some duotangs way at the back of the room and go, okay, now this next part I need you to do inside your duotangs. Get up out of your desk, run to the back, grab those duotangs, get them back. I'm going to have something on the board here for you. It's just all a setup. It's just get them to move, get them to run, get them to exercise, chat with somebody on the way, etc. Get them back in their seats ready to go. And so now I have earned the right to present a puzzle to them. So I can present a challenge to them. I can present a case study to them. Now, this is a little different. This is something that is, wow, I don't know the answer to this question. This is a little bit complex, right? I have to deliver this something in 10 minutes, but I feel safe because I've activated all of the other chemicals, those hormones in the body. And so I'm ready to produce something that's a little open-ended, for sure. That's cortisol producing, right? We don't think of it so much as educators because it's just another activity. It's high stakes sometimes for young people to be confused in front of each other, right? So when I was 14, the last thing I wanted to do was be confused. in front of a group of my peers, or not know what was going on, or feeling that I wasn't going to measure up to the rest of my. It can feel like high stakes. So I have not done that right away. I didn't start the lesson that way. Some people do that. Some people can start the lesson with a challenge and then fight their way back out of it. Just another approach. But as long as you hit all of those other hormones along the way, I think it's a great way just to think about the activity. So let's come back. Let's come back as a group. Let's debrief the activity together. Let's check for understanding, back to the dopamine as well. And then let's finally finish off and celebrate the accomplishment that we've made today with this lesson. So that's, to me, is a sample lesson, right? And so when I evaluate a learning activity, I look at all of these elements and make sure that they're inside that lesson somewhere. So if we were in a class today and it wasn't a webinar where I was shouting inside a microphone here, I would ask you to, hey, let's do a little breakout room now. How about a little breakout room? Think about your teaching. Maybe it's in person and you're working together in classrooms. Maybe it's online. Maybe it's in a hybrid environment. What activities could you do to stimulate each one of those different hormones? How would you sequence the lesson? What would you put first? What would you put third? What would you put fifth? How would you create the flow of the lessons in front of you so that throughout that lesson, the students were in the right conditions to productively struggle through that exercise and not feel that it was too high stakes or that it was too fluffy and I'm bored and there's a lot of ennui, right? So, how do we create activities that are energizing, driving, sinking, and challenging, and put them together in a scope and sequence? It's always been my approach. So I'll kind of pause there for a moment, said a lot. Maybe I haven't said much at all. Maybe you know this already. But I'm just trying to put it down in a framework that's easy to remember so you can be cognitive about the approach that you're taking when you're working with kids.
Jack, very quickly, just here, you mentioned, you said, at this point, I've earned the right to present the challenge. Can you just unpack what you mean by that and maybe connect that to how you sort of set up your talk earlier about just some of the elements in your talk? What does that mean for you?
It's a great question. I felt like I had to earn that every single time I came into the classroom, every single lesson. It was never given to me. So I feel like there's this moment where students, they understand that you have thought this out intentionally and that there's a scaffold behind it. And I find when you do that and you are intentional, and sometimes, I let students in on this. So you notice here, I've used a color scheme. A lot of times in my lesson, I will use a similar color scheme for when different activities are going to take place. And I don't even necessarily, I'm not explicit about it, but after a while, they go, oh yeah, this is going to be a group work activity. Yeah, look, it's green, right? So just prompting them, they understand what I'm trying to accomplish. But I never expect students to come into the classroom and just listen to me or respond to me just because I happen to be at the front or I happen to be the one talking in the Zoom session. So I think that there is a humility about that, that I'm always trying to execute and always trying to earn that attention from them.
Perfect. And not to take up too much time now, but I think Michael asked a question that kind of fits in the moment. So he said, I really like the sequence of events, but I also feel like by the second of the 3 slides, I've spent my 50 minutes. So when you're working in a constrained time within a high school schedule, and he asks, what tips do you have for making this work in smaller chunks?
Yeah. So, I mean, it can be sometimes that endorphins, that can be 30 seconds, right? So it's like, it can just be the way that you walk up to the classroom. I had a piece of chalk that I used to use that would break every single time I used it. The first time it's not because it broke, it's because it always used to get a laugh. And so, and you know, that would be 10 seconds, but it'd be like, all right, I got them. They're in here now, right? So a lot of times it could just be thinking short little bits and pieces. Again, the dopamine, just one quick question, one quick check-in question. A really great thing to say to students is this. Hey, I got something new for you guys that I'm really interested in what you're going to think about this, right? Now, I used that on you, right? To start this exercise, old habits die hard. But I used to do that with students when I was teaching a quadratic equation, right? Variable x, I'm going to make an x squared. I'm really interested in what you're going to think about this today, right? So just even those, they can be just minute little experiences. But you're right, and you're not going to hit them all every time, right? So you know, you go through a lesson one day in a 50-minute segment, and you'll go back and you'll debrief it and go, oh, you know what? I didn't do any syncing exercises today. There's no collaboration. I didn't even use a quick pair share. I didn't use a buzz group. I didn't do any of that. I'm like, okay, all right. It's in my mind. It's in my mind. You know, next time I'm going to try to make sure that I work that in, because I know that there's students in the room that absolutely need that. I know it's part of their personality. It's part of their persona. And I'll talk about this in a minute. If I continue to miss one of these different components, I'm going to miss out on some students along the way. So, but great point. You're not going to nail all 9 of these every single time. So that's absolutely true. So I'm going to give a quick poll. Let's do a little quick poll. Oh, there we go. Good. Oh man, popped on the screen like, David, you are good. So which of these characteristics, if you were to look at your lessons, or you were to look at your LMS, or you look at your class or whatever, would you say, hey, my go-to is to make it fun and energizing? That's my number one, right? Or my number 2 is to be collaborative and inclusive. That's the one that I go to right next, right? Maybe I'm not, complex and thought-provoking, maybe the odd time or something, organized, task-focused. I'd really be interested in knowing if you could pick 2 of those, which 2 would you pick? Which are the ones that would describe your course design the best? So if you've got a moment, if people don't mind popping in and putting that down, I'd love to see what this group feels is their particular strength in this area when they teach in their practice, right? Hosts and panelists cannot vote. Oh, I tell you. Oh, there you go. Fantastic, right? So there we've got the Arrupe Virtual Learning profile, all right, mapped out. And so this is great. We've got collaborative inclusive, which is really nice, 45%. That's fantastic. We've got a lot of complex and thought-provoking events, tremendous, that's great. A little lower on fun and energizing. So, interesting to think about, because that relationship between endorphins and cortisol becomes really important. So I told you I was a baseball player, right? So every time I would finish pitching, I'd finish pitching 6 or 7 innings, and I would get back and I'd be tired, and walking into to the dugout. And what does the pitching coach tell me to do? Go for a run. And I said, you crazy? I just pitched for 6 innings. I got to go for a run? Yeah, you're going to go for a run. And so then you go out in the outfield and you do a run, you do 3 or 4 laps, and you come back, and it's getting that aerobic sort of your heart going, and sort of you're flushing out lactic acid, which is built up over time. You're also flushing out some of that stress and cortisol. You're pitching, it's a high stress activity, high stress anaerobic activity, right? So just thinking about that and thinking about, all right, if I'm going to provide thought-provoking and challenging work, how do I make sure that I'm not missing out on any of those levels, as we move forward? Just something to think about, right? So no judgment. It's not a judgment at all. It's just thinking about it from all four of those dimensions. And then, we talked about what is your dominant teaching preference, right? So it's good to know. It's if you have a tell, right? So I actually probably thought a lot about fun and energizing a lot. That was probably a go-to for me. But then I also thought a lot about dopamine. So I always thought about motivating and making sure that things were piecemeal so that, they moved on, one at a time. I remember early in my career, when I was young, I had taken every exercise every little tiny exercise you get to do in a math curriculum, and I had divided into like these quizzes, and I was having quizzes like 4 times a day. People were doing these things, and they're very small, discrete units. I was looking for mastery time after time after time, but my class became nothing but that. All it was quizzes, and people weren't stringing information together very well. It was just they were getting, oh, we did that one, perfect. I got 10 out of 10. Let's go to the next one. Well, you got to the final exam, and the students didn't know anything. And I remember marking those exams, and I was in the math office marking the exams, and I looked up and I saw my department head, and he said to me, how's it going? And I said, it's going terrible. I said, these guys don't know anything. I said, I can show you a banker's ledger of 135 quizzes that I gave out during the year that demonstrated mastery of this topic. And we've come to the final exam and they can't put anything together. I said, I taught every single one of these concepts. And my math department head said, well, maybe you should have taught the students instead. And I thought, yeah, that's probably pretty good advice. So, understanding your tendencies, your dominant teaching preference, what's the one that you use least? And is there one that, all right, that's something I need to keep in mind. I need to make sure my students are activated before they start. How do your preferences show up on a good day? So when everything's great with me, when my wife is happy, when my kids are healthy, when there's no snow on my drive, when I didn't have to snow blow, everything is going great. I've got, a big dinner planned for the weekend. I'm really looking forward to. Somebody talked about curling. I curl 3 times a week. I've got, 2 great curling matches coming up. I just won the night before. I'm feeling fantastic. I walk into the classroom. What's my go-to, right? In that case, it's like my go-to is probably fun and energizing, right? But what's it like on a bad day? So a bad day is, I'm not having the greatest day, for a variety of different reasons. And then how do I show up on that bad day? What's my teaching preference then, right? It's always something wrong with Mr. Rice, because we just had to slug through like 5 quizzes today or something like that, right? So thinking about that. It also makes me think too, I always used to tell people that when everything is going right in your life, teaching is the best job in the world. You come in every day and you're activated, you're energized, it's tremendous. But I've never seen another job where if things aren't right in your own life, it is the most difficult job in the world to do. Because now I'm taking in all the emotions from everybody around me, trying to synthesize that and put it together, and I'm not feeling great myself. That's when it gets to be a really difficult job. So understanding that about those feelings that you have, those are real feelings, and I've been there and I know them. What's your energizing to challenging ratio? So we had some people that were, so our group here I think was 73% challenging, 18% energizing. Okay, maybe we could try to get that more to 70-30, 60-40, right? What can we do to put you in this car today? So again, just thinking because of the relationship between those 2 chemicals, and then the driving and sinking ratios. So those driving dopamine related exercises, maybe pause for a moment and go, now I actually need a collaborative moment here with the group. It was really heartened there that a lot of people think about collaboration and sort of bringing people together in group work and that during their exercises. That's great. Does my teaching zone, is it compatible with each student's individual learning zone? Well, that's a consideration, right? So when I got into, I remember when my early days as a headmaster, I would put out the notice that we're going to have a staff meeting. And I said, staff meeting today is going to be 4:02. It's not going to be at 4 o'clock. It's not going to be at 4:05. It's 4:02. It starts exactly on the number, right? This is, I'm not waiting an extra minute. This is important to me. Time is important. We're going to do it. Now, there were people in my staff that were like, thank God. I'm so glad that this is starting on time. Fantastic. That's great. There was people on my staff that would be like, forget about your 4:02. I just worked all day. I'm exhausted. You better have a bagel here for me. You better have cream cheese for me. And I'm going to sit for the first 5 minutes and chat with my friends. And you could do whatever you want. And so my question was that what I had to come to grips with is I realized I had introverts, I had extroverts, I had people that had a thinking perspective. I thought I had people with a feeling perspective. I'm like, oh man, I got to put all of those things together. I've got this whole staff of 60, 70 different people, and thinking about, is my leadership style the right leadership style for them? I can't change my go-to, but what I can is leave space and understand that people need different things. So making sure that not every one of my staff meetings started at 4:02. Right? Not all of them are 27 minutes long. So how can we make subtle changes to differentiate instruction for our students where they're out of zone, right? I've been doing too much group work, too many collaborative exercises, and now I need to move them back in a direction. So to really just that art form of really understanding what's needed at a particular time in my class. This is what I favor. This is the sequence I favor, but I have to change that sequence now. I've always described teaching as a craft. It's the use of scientific principles to support your art form. And I've always looked at it through that lens. And so you need to make changes on the fly. And then students with special needs, you learn gradually over your career that change one thing in the environment, and it can set them off greatly. So that zone becomes so important to them. When challenges get too great, you elevate the cortisol too high, it can be a month before you get them back. So you have to really watch with students that have special needs. So when I think about key takeaways from the model that I presented for you, I believe that the productive struggle results from a student in a balanced learning zone. And I think that whatever we can do as instructors to put them into that, keep them in that zone, that it helps. The number two is, I think, where we're at today, though, and that is that school and life is not evolved in a manner consistent with keeping learners in a zone. So this instrument here that notifies me every 10 seconds that there's something going on, you can imagine how that might play with my dopamine. You can imagine how that might, those impacts of those likes and those shares and all of my friends and I sent out a message today on LinkedIn. I'm dying to know whether anybody liked it or not. So I'm human, right? And so this is really a key factor in society these days. I think it makes it really important that there are safe spaces where we can really sit and think intentionally about the environment that we create, and maybe even help students to know that, hey, you're out of balance right now for this reason. Maybe this is a way that you get back into balance. Maybe the way you get balanced now is to go out and do some exercise. Maybe it's to sit in a quiet room and do a crossword puzzle. Maybe it's to actually get together with your friends. There's different ways to sort of get back in balance. The more we can be metacognitive about that, and the more we can help students to do that, regulate for themselves, the better. And I think that's really a challenge in parenting these days. I was, I was at the mall here in town. We live in a small town in Nova Scotia, and I was at the mall and I was picking something up. There's 3 stores in that mall. I mean, the thing is huge. The mall is huge. It's 3 stores. There's 3 stores in a Canadian Tire. That's all we've got, right? And so it used to be, that was the place when we were kids. You would all go to the mall. There was a movie theater in every mall. You'd check out the movies. You'd go to play the video games. You wanted to check out and see who were the boys at the mall or who were girls at the mall and who else was there and who I might be able to walk home with from the mall. It's a huge social function, right? And so nowadays the mall is in here. All my shopping is in here. All my socializing is in here. So this is really a challenge, right? It's very difficult for these students to stay in a zone. When I hear educators say things like, "Oh, these kids today, they're struggling cognitively or they're struggling socially," I actually think they're doing a very good job, given the constraints that they're under. And sometimes I think it's adults that even have a more difficult time with some of these changes, but it's just not evolved in a manner consistent with being in the zone. Last week I was talking to a gentleman who's the chief learning officer for Deloitte, a tiny company like Deloitte, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, in your emerging leaders in sort of that 25 to 30 age group where you're looking at people becoming managers and then becoming directors and senior managers and that kind of thing, are there soft skills that you see that are missing or you're struggling with?" And he says, yes. And he named them. And he said, the first thing is that when I'm working with a young person on a client engagement, the report is not the problem. The presentation likely is not the problem, but the 5 minutes where they have to talk to the client before the meeting starts, my employees would rather build a chatbot to do that than do that. And I said, that's somewhat terrifying. And he says, that's absolutely the case. He says, it's the most awkward moment in time. And so it's, that ability to just socialize that maybe we learned at the malls, it's not something that's natural anymore. And we have to be more intentional about it. And he's talking to me about ways in which he can improve that. The other piece that he talked about, and I think was really important, I'm starting to see in young people for sure, is with the advent of AI, that his employers are using AI to do their divergent thinking. So when they're trying to come up with a new idea, they will use AI and they will converge really quickly from those divergent ideas to the truth too fast. They can't stay in divergent thinking long enough. And oftentimes they're converging to answers that the client doesn't want. So I thought those were fascinating. I would ask you to be metacognitive, be like Mickey Mantle, figure out, pick up on subtle clues and find out when students are out of balance and try not to interfere so quickly, like Maria Montessori. But I always felt that the reason that Maria Montessori's classrooms, you didn't need to interfere so quickly is they were so sort of meticulously prepared. Synchronous online, kind of like what you're experiencing now, and going, oh my God, there's only 4 more minutes left in this hour, can be quite boring. So thinking like a participant, don't skip models, be intentional about hitting all of those different pieces as you go. Asynchronous online learning, heavy dopamine oftentimes, and can lead to a lot of sort of surface learning. Thinking about challenge and drive, so dopamine and cortisol, it has to be balanced by energizing and synchronicity. Last thing I talk about is assessment. So when you're assessing students, everything's fun and games until we give a grade. And then once we give a grade, you don't like me anymore, right? So again, really building up that trust. I encourage educators these days, especially in the days of AI, don't be so focused on the accuracy of preliminary artifacts, right? Think about things that are give feedback and allow for revision, allow for revision. If you do that, people will engage a little bit more in a bit of that struggle. And I often tell people, assess like you're a lawyer, not a judge. So the standards will judge for you, but be on the side of your student. Just say, hey, I'm here to gather evidence. So we need to meet these particular standards. Let's gather evidence together. You help me gather evidence to show you that you're meeting these particular standards. And so think in terms of a portfolio of work from your students. And I certainly could talk more about assessment if I had time. And lastly, for AI, what are we afraid of? And I think there's a lot to be afraid of with AI, but make sure you're afraid of the right things. I had an English teacher talk to me and say, Jack, I had a student and all he's done for 3 weeks is go on ChatGPT and have a conversation about Hamlet. And I said, and you're worried about, I said, I studied Hamlet in school. I never read it. I didn't crack the book. I just asked somebody next to me what it was about, and it was somebody's uncle. That's all I knew. I said, that's a great use of ChatGPT to really try to dig into to Hamlet and why it's just like the Lion King or whatever it happens to be. So I think there's great sort of uses of AI, and we should celebrate them. And there's also uses that are a little bit more nefarious, and we really need to educate. But really think about why you were afraid. And if you're afraid of AI because you're no longer a judge, interrogate that a little bit more about your practice. So 3 books you can read if you're done listening to me. Great book by Tony Wagner and Joel Christensen called Mastery. Why we should be shooting more for deeper learning today in an age of distraction. The End of Average by Todd Rose talks about a world that is sort of converging into sameness, and why things outside the square can be the most valuable. And lastly, a publication by a below average author that's coming out in June called Learning in the Age of Hybridity by myself. And that's been a lot of fun to write. It was based on a couple of talks that I did at Moodle. So I probably have gone right to time, and I apologize for that. But hopefully you got something out of that today, and think about ways you can integrate that into your practice.
Jack, thank you very much. I do want to say to everyone, thank you for staying. If anybody has to leave, please, by all means, we want to honor your time. We will send out a recording. If anybody does want to stick around for a few minutes for a couple of questions, we will have a couple of those, and just share a little bit. And again, those will be part of the recording. So if you have to go, you can still access those. So Jack, once again, thank you very much. I just want to start off, if you don't mind, with the question. You talked about differentiation. You talked about not producing too much struggle and the adverse effects that can create. You talked about kids with different learning styles and needs, and also just even comfortability with certain subject areas. So it doesn't even have to be something that is particularly diagnosed or something. It could just be, I struggle in this area, whatnot. And the stress that may arise, when we are doing certain kinds of activities versus other people who might celebrate diving deeply into something. So I guess what I'm curious about is and you sort of alluded to it a little bit, but what do you feel is the role of student choice in helping us as teachers to create the right conditions to find that balance and that opportunity for multiple hormonal releases, in synchronicity, but just going in different places to allow for these different bodies and these different human beings who are in front of us?
Yeah, you're talking about choice, giving different choices, right?
Yeah, and how do you see that sort of playing a part within the structure?
Yeah, it's funny because I think giving choice is a great idea to students, but what's the great quote by Sartre? Man is always on the horns of a dilemma, right? it's sometimes choice that can lead to the stress in the world. Like, should I have tea or coffee today? Should I, do this or do that? Like, it's being on the horns of a dilemma. So you can really overload students with choice as well. So to be really intentional about guiding them towards choices. The big thing is to listen. I mean, I think really listen to the students and understand, why they are having so much trouble in this particular area. And a lot of times it's they're afraid to start. The talk that I'm giving at Moodle this year is called My Favorite Mistake. And I'm going to talk about, art, poetry, music, science. Every great invention of our time started with a mistake. And yet we decided that we would evaluate schools in a standardized manner, where the one with the least mistakes wins. And it's just so incompatible, right? So I always had this moment of really celebrating mistakes in classrooms and sort of, hey, that was just your first try. Let's put that one away. First try. But actually you made some really interesting mistakes here. That's really neat, right? So I just felt like a lot of it was attitude, and a lot of times it was support. I want to build an education system that's based on human frailty. I think it's what we have left. I think it's part of our consciousness, and so just celebrating the fact that we got that one wrong, right? But how did we get it wrong, right? So most students, I was teaching in math. I was like, all you got to do is just guess, because if you give me a guess, that's something I can work from, right? 2 to the exponent 3 is 7. Interesting. How did you get there? That's fascinating. How did your mind work to get to 7? So, so just be careful with choice, because choice can be stress inducing itself. But yeah, I like the idea of thinking about it like, I think this particular thing would work better for this student in a group work setting versus in a quiz setting versus in a case study challenge, right? So thinking about different ways to assess.
Awesome, thank you. If anybody does have any other questions, please feel free to throw them into the chat just before we end off. Before that, we'll ask a second question here. You talked about the importance of questions, and the way you presented it was sort of directed from the teacher to the student, right? So like a what question before even a how, before a why. What about the place of student? We're sort of going to this, I think maybe where you ended off the last answer, but what's the role of student questions within our imaginings of how we create and organize opportunities and events in our classes?
Yeah, I think, student questions are great. They're risky. They're risky, especially in groups where, I'm a student and I'm asking a dumb question, right? Or what I perceive to be a dumb question. It can even just be the way that the teacher looks at me after I've asked the question, the snickers that other students might have if I ask that question means I won't ask it twice. Now I might if I'm 27, but again, if I'm 14, I'll only do that once, whether I'll never ask another question again. My first high school dance, my mom made me put on a tie and dress shoes. And so I walked to the high school dance. Nobody else was dressed in a tie and dress shoes. That was the last high school dance I ever went to. Thinking about what its risks. So I think it's the way that we approach student questioning and try to sometimes make it anonymous, right? Hey, let's have some fun. Let's put a fishbowl out here. Everybody jot down a question on the fish, throw it in the fishbowl, and I'll choose a few out of there, right? And so as I choose those different questions, I pretty much know who's asking what questions. But again, a little bit of that anonymous nature when things are public. I'm always really sensitive to the risk that students take in your classes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think it works in conjunction with what you highlighted about the place and the way that cell phones shape young people's ideas of self-image and the curation of an image. So I think those work interestingly together too. I think that may be sort of where we are. I think we're about 10 minutes over here, so I want to kind of honor your time as well. And thank you to the folks who stayed with us. And once again, Jack, thank you very much. Mr. Hausman, do you have any last parting words?
No, thank you, Jack. That's I'm happy that you joined, and David, I don't need to say anything more at this point. You covered it all as always. So
the invitation. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jack. And stay tuned for the email follow-up with the recording and a bit more context from us as well on next steps.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.